I like to say that focus is something you pick. You decide, I'm going to focus on serving them and solving this problem. Clarity is something you build. So when people go, I guess I can't resonate for years, Jay, or for a few months, I'm like, no, pick a focus, but you don't have any clarity around what you're saying around that focus. Now we got to go write and speak. Now we got to go build that focus. And I can provide frameworks and templates to make it easier.
You've built real expertise in your field, and you want that expertise to create the influence and the impact you know it deserves. You're creating content, showing up consistently, trying to reach more people. But you're kind of confounded because the harder you work to expand your reach, the less your message seems to resonate. You're getting views, but not creating the urge to act. You're being heard, but not becoming anyone's favorite. We'll fix that today on The Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and joining us is Jay Acunzo. He's discovered that the secret isn't marketing more, it's mattering more through what he calls premise development. Today, Jay will show you how to transform expertise into influence by thinking resonance over reach, and why the strongest voices don't try to be the best, they become their audience's favorite. So have a pen and paper ready, because Jay is going to show you the formula to create your powerful premise in the market. Hello, Jay. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Park. I appreciate it. Long time coming.
Yeah, it has. I've been following your work for a long, long time, and something really caught my attention a few weeks ago when you were talking about your approach to premise. And we'll do a deep dive into that, but putting Anne Handley's story through it with her new book coming out, and I just thought it was very fascinating. I have a lot of admiration for her and her work, and of course, what you've been up to. So for our listeners who don't know of you, can you give us a bit of your backstory?
Yeah, you can understand me with a very simple premise. Perfectly, very meta, right? We tell stories for storytellers. We market to marketers. My premise might just be premise. I'm like Ken from the Barbie movie. My job is just beach. My job is just premise. Anyways, my premise is to think resonance over reach. I want to help people who have deep expertise. You have a lot of competence, and what you're searching for in the world is resonance when you show up to communicate. And so I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and experts and executives to become stronger public voices. And for me, that began by applying it to my own life as a wannabe sports journalist. Like, I always wanted to tell saccharine stories of athletes and write human interest pieces and tell stories of all kinds bottled up into the sports world. It's a microcosm of humanity. And in 2008, I actually got my first job in sales at Google, of all things. So definitely not sports journalism, but it showed me that business is an even larger encapsulation of all of humanity, where storytelling is very much needed. And so I did a tour of duty in tech, working in sales at Google, and I was the head of content at HubSpot, and then a small startup, and even a VC firm before I became independent in, 2016. And my first foray into independent work wasn't to sell a service. It wasn't to start a software company. It was actually as a professional keynote speaker, which people think, what, did you get famous first and then it happened? It's like, no, you can decide to do that the way you decide to build a design agency or a YouTube channel on Star Wars that you earn a living through. Like, these are consciously considered processes and crafts, and there's a business to it. But what I saw firsthand was people with deep expertise, when done right in the keynote world, people have this really deep expertise, learning to package and communicate that expertise to resonate by first turning it into some kind of concept or idea, which I call a premise. This show has a premise, a speech has a premise, a business, a platform, and a personal brand needs a premise. And then you build IP around that premise. And all of a sudden, everywhere that person shows up, they're communicating in a way that grips you and moves you to take an action, even if that action is in your head or your heart. And so as I emerged from road-heavy travel-based speaking and wanted to start a family and stay at home, I pivoted behind the scenes to doing that work for other people, where you run an agency or you sell a product or a service. You're not looking to be a full-time road warrior speaker. But I do think that if you have substance, if you have expertise, if you have a desire to serve, you can learn to communicate like the voices we admire. So I'm trying to be somewhat of an arms dealer for what I consider to be the good folks in the world, because Lord knows there's a lot of people out there who have all reach and no resonance, all hype and no substance behind it. And so that's why I tell people, like, the goal is not to market more, it's to matter more, so you can stop chasing attention and become the one that other people seek.
Well, and that's a real pivot, isn't it? Because most people in our world, they're all about reach. How many followers do I
Yeah,
have? How much engagement do I get? How many times, am I shared online or whatever? They're
right.
looking to really expand that reach. But you've changed that. Said, don't worry so much about the reach. Just make sure those who you are reaching, you resonate with.
Yeah, it's funny because when you investigate as an author might or a speaker might any one concept, you start doing seemingly silly things that really actually ends up mattering to your IP. Like, one of those things is, I looked in the sciences and the world outside of marketing for this concept of resonance. I didn't obviously coin that word. We all know the word resonance. And when I say resonance over reach, some people light up and they sort of implicitly get it. But you really have to make overt what you're trying to say, which might include defining some key terms. Like, maybe you define the problem for people, but also if you keep saying a word, are we sure we know what that means really? And when you look in the science, you find something I think pretty important for our work in the business world, which is when two frequencies are aligned, they are considered resonant. And the first can impart an energy to the second. And I'm like, okay, so resonance in our world is the urge to act that someone feels when your message or a moment with you creates this sudden desire to take an action because they feel amplified. It's the urge to act, right? We all want action, but we don't know how to use our words, our messages, our stories to impart the urge to act that people need first, right? So for me, whether you're like I am, you identify as a craft driven creative, or if you're a cold hard capitalist, it sort of doesn't matter. You should care more about resonance because that's why people take an action. It's like you can get in front of people and still not spark an action for them. What good is awareness if you don't have affinity? What
Mhm.
good is reach if you don't have resonance? So why not start with the thing that triggers a result and then build your way outward from there instead of and I get why we do this. It's either lazy or it's just ingrained in us to like blast more content out on the feed and check more boxes and race harder on the hamster wheel, like shout into the storm, hoping to be heard. Where my stance is always like, okay, well, what could you say that you could merely whisper? Like, what if you could whisper something and it connects that deeply that people go, yes, this, I'm going to go with you and I'm going to refer five friends to you because that's the job, isn't it? We're supposed to be communicators. The job is not to get our words in front of people. The job is to ensure that people care.
Okay, give us a real world example of a premise in action.
There are several famous ones that a lot of us have encountered over the years that are easy to start with. Maya Angelou, she goes, it has been my experience that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so she was this walking embodiment of that premise. Or my favorite storyteller ever, Anthony Bourdain, he said it. I'm going to butcher this impression, but he would say, "Your body is not a temple; it's an amusement park. Enjoy the ride." Right? Like Uncle Tony, the legend, had a premise for how he approached food and travel, and he had several, I would say. Simon Sinek in the business world, very, very popular premise and influential person. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And to me, you can define a premise not as a mission or even a North Star. A premise is a defensible assertion. You are here to defend your stance or your perspective, right? It's a lens through which you see everything. People might not even hear your premise publicly, although I would argue why in our world you do want them to. But it's a lens through which you see everything. It's an assertion you make about a topic others care about, right? It's a little different than the Simon Sinek find your why thing because that guides you. The premise is definitely meant to be out in the market, helping you have an impact in the market and influence that market. Some people go, oh, so it's a niche. No, a niche defines the outer bounds of your market. A premise is how you influence that market, right? So a simple definition we can understand is if you think of the fact that your competitive set all talks about the same topics as you, the prompting question is how do you see your topic or your space? Or said better,
Mhm.
how do you see it? Can you quickly articulate and defend that? So think of it as an insightful reframe on a familiar topic. So if you go more recent, you get someone like author James Clear. Atomic Habits. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Or my friend Michelle Warner, who coaches small businesses on their business model and marketing strategies. She's an independent consultant and coach. She says you need to prioritize sequence over strategy, because to build a small business, doing things in the right order matters more than doing any of them particularly well. And you might defend against these stances, but these individuals have all the IP, like terminology and stories and framework, where they're going to construct a logical case for why their audience should buy into their premise, their insightful reframe on a familiar topic, instead of yet more content that just sort of generically talks about the topic directly. So it's all about taking your perspective, making it memorable and repeatable, and then creating a platform of influence around that premise.
So, do you have to have that premise down first before you create the resonance?
I love, love, love this question, because here's why. When I run a training for a team or a cohort for individual entrepreneurs or creators, there are some people who, as the experience progresses in the day or across several weeks, they really get stuck with that first question of like, but it's not it yet. So I don't know how to do it's not, I don't have the idea. I'm not saying it as crisply as those examples you gave me, Jay. It's not it. And what you learn as an author and a speaker is that you first raise your hand, whether you're like me and you're a spicy Sicilian, so you have a lot of frustration when you observe the conventional wisdom, or maybe you're a little more calm and a little more analytical. But either way, you turn the frustration or your observations into better questions. So it always starts from a place of curiosity. Like, I'll give you an example from my life. When I first started becoming a speaker, I really could not stand, after years in content marketing and in corporations, I could not stand like average content that everybody seems so intent on churning out, because I was always more interested in the art anyway. And I thought that was better for business too. And so initially, I would just raise my hand and say, is anyone else feeling this pain? I hate this, right? This is terrible. Do you see what I see? And then I go investigating by creating a writing practice where once a week I'll write about that topic, right? Just for me, just to understand it, maybe to send up a flare into the sky that other people see and maybe come my way if they're already aligned, sort of those true believers. But it starts by being this investigator, asking bigger, bolder questions, or even the obvious question that others might ask, right? But it sends you on this investigative journey to understand, why do I feel not great about the status quo? What am I really trying to say? And you use your public content not just as distribution, but as a way to think, because writing is thinking, but also a way to bring with you your biggest supporters and true believers, right? Like when you see somebody at scale with passionate responses, I don't think it's because they worked out a perfect idea and now suddenly they're sharing it. That's some of it. But I think a lot of those people have been with them on the journey all along. And the book or the speech or the pithy turn of phrase is like the culmination of an investigative journey. And so a lot of people go, well, that means I can't publish content, I can't create any kind of resonance in the world, can't tell stories, nothing till I find my premise. I'm like, no, at first it's for you. It's you trying to understand through frustration and curiosity what you're trying to say. Then you make an attempt to say it. Like my follow-up to why average content was, oh, best practices are bad. Best practices are the problem. And then you investigate that for a while. And then I realized, well, actually, it's not so much best practices, it's why we find safety and comfort and confidence in somebody's best practice. It's because we live in this tyranny of the right answer. Like in school, your worth is you have the answer. Now you operate in a business setting where there is no one right answer. Have you adapted how you approach the work? Don't be an expert, be an investigator, right? Like that's a premise. Both have merit. Being an expert, it matters. Expertise is foundational. Being an investigator, I'm here to say, to solve this problem that, my first flurry of public content as an independent was addressing, my first book, my first speech, back in 2018, what I was saying to the world is, I like expertise. Expertise matters a ton, but let's get our priorities straight. And so the premise is kind of this good versus good comparison, right? The
Hmm.
James Clear, you don't rise to the level of your goals, fall to the level of your system. Goals are good. Systems are good. Resonance is good. Reach is good. How do you see these things? Like put them in order for people or tell them which one matters in this moment or for that problem. So long way of saying, as you slide a soapbox under me, Park, these things are iterative. But in the iteration, you actually pick up some really passionate fans so long as you can remain like focused on the questions and focused on the problem you're trying to solve. I like to say that focus is something you pick. You decide, I'm going to focus on serving them and solving this problem. Clarity is something you build. So when people go, I guess I can't resonate for years, Jay, or for a few months, I'm like, no, pick a focus, but you don't have any clarity around what you're saying around that focus. Now we got to go write and speak. Now we got to go build that focus. And I can provide frameworks and templates to make it easier.
So, an example of a premise, I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking in my own world. And this happened to me in Chicago many years ago, just before COVID. And I was working with a large sales team out there, and they're very good. I mean, 60 very driven, smart salespeople in the
Yeah.
healthcare business. And the person that brought me in came to me and said, my people are really getting tripped up on this idea of story and storytelling, that they don't have the confidence to find their story and nobody wants to hear their story and whatever. And that's when it really hit me, Jay. I go, well, it's actually not about your overarching story. It's about the moments or the scenes in that story. And that's
Yes.
what you want. So I created a premise, according
Yeah.
to your definition, that I said, stop looking for your story and
Yeah.
start finding your scenes.
Yeah, so
Knit
that's great.
together.
You're like,
Is that a
having
premise?
a story, this overarching narrative about myself or someone else has merit, right? You're not here to say those don't matter. You're saying, but in order to create those stories, or what gives them impact, or where you start your process, is to focus on the scenes more than the stories, right? Like there's this kind of before and after. All these phrases, by the way, I don't want people in their head over. It's not a tagline. I mean, that's the outcome of
Right.
lots of working to refine your thinking. I like to joke that you're kind of going through this phase of what I call your 2-drink minimum version of yourself. Like, or you just can't hold back. I got to rant to my closest friend and confidant about what I see at work. Like, you're no longer thinking, I need to wordsmith immediately. That comes later. Make it shorter and better later. Get the raw thinking out there by expressing yourself a lot, by working with a confidant or collaborator or coach, by trying to notebook or whatever your process is. You really have to dig, and then out comes something as pithy as you said, Park, right? Because you've been thinking about this and talking about it for years and years. So like the little phrases I'm giving where I'm like, that's a premise. Yeah, that's the summary of a premise. Like it really happens in long form first till you
Mhm.
get to the short form. So A, I love what you said, but B, I don't want people to hear this so far and get intimidated that they're like, oh, I don't have a one-liner that says it yet.
Yeah, and mine was really an answer to a problem, because
Yeah,
they came and said, they're loving the training, they're just still not courageous enough to really understand what you mean by story. And that's when I
right,
go,
right.
oh, it's not, don't get lost in this big epic narrative. It's about the
Yeah.
scenes, that moment when something changed. Tell us about that moment. And then the light went on for all of them. And they're like, oh, okay,
It's
that's what he's
funny.
talking about.
You reminded me of a really good one. This one of my favorite premises about storytelling is from Ira Glass. Great stories happen to those who can tell them. And so what he's not saying there is the only people that get clubbed over the head with inspirational stories to tell just happen to be masters of the craft. No, he's saying it is a craft and you don't experience like stories writ large. You experience your life and then you put your butt in the seat and you craft that material into stories. Like it is something you decide, that observation, that moment, that series of actions, something I saw, something I heard, whatever. These are all threads. And then I got to do the stitching, in the notebook or on a microphone or in my whatever. And so like I host a podcast called How Stories Happen, where I basically borrowed that premise and said, that's what I believe. I do believe we decide to create stories. You can't wander the earth waiting for stories to happen to you. So the show is called How Stories Happen. How do stories happen? Intentionally, piece by tiny piece, by experiencing your life and then documenting what you see and then deciding to draft a bunch of bad stories. And then down the road, one becomes a signature story, whatever. It's a craft. And so when I interview somebody, it could be our friend Jay Bear or Seth Godin, it could be a client. I'm asking them, yes, to share their advice on storytelling, but mostly to put a story on display that they tell and then make sense of it with me. Like, how did that
Mhm.
come together? Why not this instead of that? We want to make sure that the minutia is what's front and center, not these grand ideas of storytelling, because then someone has to go away and go tell stories and they're like, I didn't play pro ball. I didn't sell a company to Google for $1 billion. I don't have a traumatic event, so I have no stories. And I'm like, BS. Everyone has stories, but you have to give yourself permission to consider your life as inspiration to tell good stories. You have to document that and tell those.
Well, and they build on each other. You arrive at a story, you go, oh gosh, I forgot about that time when,
Yeah,
and I can use that as an example to make this business point. And then all of a sudden, boom, another one pops up. Oh,
right,
and then there was that one that
right.
makes this other business point, and they just sort of feed on each other.
Yeah, totally. And the best part is that interwoven, like it starts to enmesh. Like I always joke, you're building a super suit around your person as a storyteller to have a premise. Because the premise, if you know Iron Man and those characters, it's like your heads up display, right? It's the operating system, it's the lens through which you see everything. So if I'm going to take a topic, although this sounds clunky, I don't say it publicly, I'm like, how do I resonance overreach this? Right? How do I press this idea through the lens of my premise? Sometimes I'm saying that consciously to myself because I want to make sure everything is aligned with my message. But mostly it's just implicit because I wander to the earth thinking about how do I help people put premise over or resonance over reach and develop a premise, not just share expertise, but use their expertise to arrive at IP. Like I'm thinking of this the same way everywhere. So then someone says, Jay, how do I book more keynote speeches? And I'm like, okay, well, somebody out there would give the advice on, how to do a volume of pitches outbound or how to get famous online or how to whatever, game the system to be a best-selling author. And then speeches happen. And I'm like, okay, resonance over reach, the way you sell a keynote is backwards to selling other things because people who see you today should rush up to you to invite you to keep speaking. It's like if you ate at a restaurant, then decided to pay. They saw you give the whole product, the whole keynote, then those people sitting there are your best leads that close the fastest at the highest dollar figures. It's about the speech today, driving follow on stage side leads, right? And I can give you a lot of advice and stories around that one nugget, but it's all pressing it through this one premise of to take a resonance over reach approach, to matter more and not market more. How do I answer that one question? So it starts to become this, it's like superpower. It supercharges everything you do because all of a sudden you see applications of it everywhere. And then when your ideal customer is thinking, I need someone for X, they're not going, cool, put Jay and Park and 70 other people on a spreadsheet, list that out by price. They're going, oh, I love the way Park sees storytelling. I love the way Jay sees speaking and IP development. Like, let's go to them. They're the one that you get picked because of your premise.
So your premise really is the signal in the noise.
Yes, totally. And not just having it, right? It's not nice. It's fine if it's in a deck. I'm sure you get this a lot. It's like, so a brand story, Park, it's like a pristine deck that a consultant designed for me. And it's like, well, what good is that if you yourself are not a storyteller, right? So we have to go embody these ideas, speak to them, practice speaking to them, etc. But once you have it, it sort of opens the door to clarity, right? You're like, I've been focusing on this topic or this messy list of topics for a while now, but all of a sudden now I can speak to it crisply and clearly and with like a logical argument to get you to buy into my thinking. Because, that's what a speech
Yeah.
is a good argument, right? And with stories to support it as well.
Well, give us an example of maybe one of your customers or something you've seen in action
Yeah.
out there. Let's take one of the most arcane industries, whatever that might be. And you talk about turning people from an informational expert into a transformational
Yeah.
voice.
Yes.
Maybe someone came to you and you even went, whew, I'm not sure what to do with this. Take us through how that premise evolved. What is
Yeah.
it and what was the outcome?
I have the perfect example. So, thinking of the world of like business, finance, and operations. And so, there's a woman named Susan Bowles that I got to work with, Boles. She runs a business called Beyond Margins, which right away is surprising. Just the brand name when she came to me, I was like, you're a former CFO and COO. You're building an agency that helps other clients, other businesses, manage and implement better finance and operations and all these things. What in the world are you saying? Beyond Margins is the name of your business. And she couldn't really explain it to me quickly, but over an hour, I walk away going, Susan's great, right? And isn't that the rub for so many communicators and entrepreneurs? It's like, if I had an hour with you, I'd get it. But 0.2% of people will ever get that hour with you. Everyone else needs to get it quicker. And so what we found with Susan's idea was the first thing she needed was what I call a narrative argument, because she had a concept, she had an emerging premise, there was a tagline on her homepage, and it supported the beyond margins idea, which is she wants to help you make calm your new KPI. And I'm like, do you really believe that? Or is that just a nice soundbite? She's like, I really believe that. I'm like, do you really help audiences and entrepreneurs and small business owners? She's like, we really help with our services and our educational products. We really help people make calm their new KPI. I'm like, what does that mean? And then it fell apart or it snowballed. And so we created this argument. And the argument follows kind of a set number of beats to move from where others are at in their understanding to where you want them to be. So think of it almost like a keynote, like the basis of a keynote. The first beat of the argument is, how are you going to help me? And so you respond, if you're Susan, with like, well, you're a small business owner and you got into building your business because you either didn't want the corporate life or you rejected it after a time and you're done with that world. And you're trying to build a business that fits your life and your team's life and serves your customers. Here's who you are and what you're going for. And once you establish, here's your goal, they will follow up in their head by asking, well, aren't I trying to achieve that goal? And if you're Susan, you go, yes, you are. Here's what I've observed. In the world of finance and operations, you have all this smart technology. You have all these processes. By the way, most of them were learned by you at a large corporation or the people giving you advice. That's where they learned it. And so here's exactly what you're going through. Here's the status quo. People follow up in their head with another question. Yeah, aren't I am going through that to achieve that goal. Why not keep doing that? And then you get to really unleash if you're an entrepreneur like Susan. Susan says, well, here's all the problems. You're designing all these systems, which are actually only really good for businesses with throughput. You have a lot of problems because you're burning out to do these things and manage these systems, and you're missing your kids' t-ball game and all these things. And all these problems look like what the audience is going through. Here's your goal. Here's your approach. Here are the problems with that. And then Susan can come in, or any of us as a true visionary would, and say, and all those problems are caused by this root illness. And for Susan, that was, you are designing a business according to the default settings out in the business world. You've built a default business by making default choices that you make without thinking or because others said you should. You want something that's calmer. You need to make calmer choices, not default choices. And she said, you need to make calm your new KPI. Now we have the premise next. The calm as a new KPI is a nice tagline. But then she followed it up with this line when we worked together. If you want a business that's different, you actually have to measure something different. Okay, that's great. I understand now the before and after moment. I understand the change, the conventional wisdom. Now there's new wisdom to be had. I can see how you're aligned with my goals. You understand my current approach. You've articulated pain I've seen and you've diagnosed it. So to cure that, you're asking me to make this one change. I actually have to measure something different to build a business that's different. I have to make calm my new KPI. And then the follow-up question is where every expert wants their audience to be, which is, I'm ready, how? And Susan's like, okay, first, here's a framework. On the one side, you have default companies. On the other, you have calm. And there's 4 dimensions of your business. And they have a spectrum on each. And if your spectrum looks like this, you're this kind of business. And if your spectrum looks like that, you're that kind of business. There's 5 archetypes. And depending on our assessment, I'll figure out the archetype with you. And then here's the advice and here's the services. So we leap to the how without having a narrative argument for how we see it to get them on board with it. So those beats again were, what are their goals? What's their current approach? What are the problems with the current approach? What illness or root cause do you see? What change do they need? And then how do they do it? And all along the way, by the way, is opportunity for stories, right? Especially when you give this big assertion, like make calm your new KPI or think resonance over reach. Someone might say, how does that look? Who's done that? Then you tell a story, right? So all along the way with this core argument, you're looking for opportunities to show, not tell, which is where a great story can help. A metaphor, a personal story, a case study, you name it. But it starts with, you have a lot of competence. To get resonance, you need a narrative argument so people buy into what you see. And again, what you see, I call the premise.
And so did you create these steps of that narrative argument, just through your work and seeing it, in action out there? And you
No,
kind
this
of
is
arrived
not
at it?
original to me. No, I want to be clear. Like, this is how keynote speakers think. You're trying to shift their paradigm. You're trying to challenge them pretty heavily. And so you get, I learned this from Andrew Davis, who's a wonderful author and speaker. He gave me a version of a prompted list of questions to help develop a keynote speech, called it a dialogue outline, right? You're having a dialogue with the audience. You have Tamsin Webster is another influence on my work with Find Your Red Thread, where she models out how do you actually get to these differing layers of truths that people need to hear and design a through line or a message? And so I cannot ever say that I cannot ever say that I'm not standing on the shoulders of giants. But as a keynote speaker, Tamsin, myself, Drew, you're there to challenge someone's perspective. And I think the mistake where you get a bad keynote or a wannabe thought leader, for example, is they're just there to like sound pithy or sound like you're bad, be good, but in their own words, right? And that's not serving anybody.
Yeah.
In all these cases, the way I teach it, the way Drew designs his speeches along these lines, the way Tamsin teaches it, whoever, if you notice the commonality, it's this. You really have to start from a place of alignment with the audience. Again, back to the resonance definition, the two frequencies that are aligned, or the energy to act because your message is so aligned with them. Like the absolute best outcome of resonating is they go, yeah, I know bigger or glossier or more awarded competitors exist, but you're my favorite. The absolute best outcome is like, forget being the best, be their favorite.
Mhm.
Right? That's the depth of resonance you can achieve. That's a moat worth building for any business. And the only way you're going to get there is if it immediately begins from a place of, I understand what you want and what you're going through. However, I've looked harder at this and I think there's a problem we're not addressing and a change we need as a result. And I can logically, not by shouting at you, which is the mistake a lot of speakers make, but I can give you a logical argument for why you would see it this way, rooted in what you care about, what you know about, who you are, what you're going through, and what you want already. So it always begins from alignment, no matter the kind of messaging model or keynote outline that you use.
You have an excellent Friday newsletter that comes out, and I was reading it the other day, and you went through this with Ann Handley's new book,
Yeah.
ASAP, as slow as possible. And I
Right.
found it really, really interesting. And of course, that's why I reached out and said, hey, man, I want you to come on the show and talk about this idea around premise. Can you walk us through? It's going to be really selfishly for me. I loved reading it, but I would like to hear your thought process in how you created the various premises.
Yeah.
And then which one you felt was the best and which one you felt was the worst.
Totally. So, Anne, I should make clear what I'm doing here. I called it a premise punch up. Anne and I text very few people like Anne Handley about work things, and she shares a lot of pain she's going through or cool projects she wants to build or whatever. But one of the things that I've grown very appreciative of is she's very willing to get it right instead of try to be right. And that's a mistake a lot of us make, I think, is we like this feeling, again, the tyranny of the right answer. I have it. Here it is. And now my idea is a proxy for my self-worth. But the folks that I admire, including Anne, including comedians or musicians even, like the people who have these exceptional ideas out in the world, they put it in front of people they trust and they're like, what do you make of that? It's on the board in front of us. We're shoulder to shoulder facing it. It's not a proxy for me and my self-worth. And so, Anne, to her credit, she doesn't need to do this at her stature anymore, but she's always like workshopping ideas to improve them. And so I said, hey, I'd done this with a friend of ours before in my newsletter, Joe Polizzi. And I said, I punched up Joe's premise in public for his new book. I know you have one coming out, Anne. I'm happy to do the same. And she jumped all over it. And so what I asked her to send me was, how do you currently articulate this defensible assertion you're making about speed and its impact on our success, but also more broadly on our lives? And so the description she sent me, do you want me to read it? You want to go through the evolution here? How would you like to do this?
Yeah,
Park?
no, let's, whatever.
You want to go through it?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Sweet. All right. So she said, in a world obsessed with speed, choosing to slow down is a joyful rebellion. Slowing down isn't falling behind. It's how you choose to get ahead. We've been told to move faster, hustle harder, optimize everything. But what if that's the wrong goal? And so you can see she's going to ask more open-ended questions, and then she's going to talk about what her premise is. ASAP, as slow as possible, is a joyful rebellion against the cult of urgency. It's a practical, research-backed, story-filled guide to slowing down. Not all the time, only when it matters most, so you can think more clearly, create more meaningfully, and live with more purpose. It's time to reclaim your time, energy, and attention in a world that wants to hijack them. And so what I notice here is there's like this line in this, and that's a piece of what she sent me. There's a line in what she sent me that I was like, okay, this is a thread to pull to develop a premise, because great premises create a before and after effect. If I encounter you or your ideas, I will never see that topic the same way again. There's a before and after effect. That's why I fall in love with premise, because I'm in love with speaking. And good speeches do the same thing. They break patterns before and after effect. And so the premise is like the densest dose of that, and it should inform everything you do. So here's the line that approximates the pattern break. Slowing down isn't falling behind. It's how you choose to get ahead. So she's taken this idea of slowing down and she is reframing it. Some people might say you should slow down and be okay with falling behind. Or some people might say, I know we don't want to fall behind, but actually, and then they're going to rationalize why some moments of pause and like they'll say run your own race. They'll say that a lot. So there's other versions of this in the market, and this feels sharp and it feels like there's a before and after. Slowing down isn't falling behind. It's how you choose to get ahead. So what I'm thinking about is slower is better is not the premise, because that's not what Anne is saying. She's bringing nuance. How do you articulate nuance quickly without losing it? And I'm trying to like punch it up a little bit with a few options. So one of the first ones was the fastest way to get ahead is to slow down when it matters most, which creates a little pop of like paradox there. You're like, oh, tell me more. And it's sort of a riff on slow is smooth and smooth is fast kind of thing, where you're basically saying you do want speed. You are trying to get ahead quickly, but to do that, you have to slow down. And, I go back and forth with Anne and she's like, yeah, but I'm not just speaking to people's like work lives. I'm not so sure about that. And so you keep playing with the phrase and, I'll skip some of the messiness. There's an article on my site people can see, but the one I landed on that I like most, in a world obsessed with speed, your competitive edge is knowing when to slow down. And, I don't know if that's exactly what Anne is going for, but I'm looking for how do I make sure that sticks and stays? And more to the point of using a premise, how do I make sure that it equips Anne or people encountering Anne to go, oh, I get it, and it's not void of nuance? Because that's the last thing we want, is to say, like, it's all about this, I have the panacea. What Anne is saying here is we are obsessed with speed out in the world, and it's important that we know when to slow down, not just that we slow down. And then this book is going to be ringing the bell for that truth and probably giving you framework for making those choices, which is exactly what you want if you're an author or a speaker, or an executive leading a team, is you want something powerful and pithy and memorable, but not either obvious that anyone else would say or lacking in nuance that people can just easily swat away.
Now, can you use this approach to creating that signal in the noise, this premise? I also kind of think of it as positioning in the marketplace, but how you speak to that position is sort of this premising is just the way I'm hearing it.
Yep.
You use it to help speakers and experts find their voice to go out and be in the public, write a book, do this sort of thing. Can you also use it on a product? And where I'm going with this, of course, is our Story Cycle Genie, because I have now I've written a lot of different ways to talk about this thing. And I go, well, what is the singular, clear premise for our Genie?
Yes, I love that. So what we're talking about fundamentally is you start by refining your ideas. You're trying to get to the core of what you'd like to say to the world, but to do that, you have to get it out of you and onto the page, right? So it's messy to start, and then you put good form and function and framework to it. I'm an English lit major, so I have to alliterate 75% of the time. Yeah, I'm on the right show for that, I think.
Yep.
And so I think like you have a lot out in the world, but hopefully onto the page. Then you try to construct that narrative argument. Like, this is what I'm trying to say to the world. And I might not actually say these exact things in that order. It might just inform what I'm doing or lead to good brainstormed content or whatever. But you start long form. And then you need to message that in the places where long form isn't going to fly, like a product sales page, to your point, or your website above the fold copy, or a quick little interaction you have in the hallway or something like that. And so what you want to do, and the short answer is yes, this can apply to a product, is you want to come up with 3 distinct phrases in order that sort of summarize your message. It takes the long form copy, it makes it more palatable, not only for you to remember it as you bring it with you, but also for others to like grab distinct handholds as they climb down from like a superficial understanding with you to something deeper, or a superficial level of trust and relationship to something deeper. So I call this a laddered message. you want to find 3 phrases that, by the way, you can either brand or just say a lot and own, where it starts with you want, and it goes to you need, and it goes to our hope. So let's start with we want. Like for me, I'm not going to say to the world immediately resonance over reach. I'm going to get a lot of questions and a lot of pushback. So at first I'll say don't market more, matter more. That's the tip of the spear. That's the above the fold copy. That's the on the sales page. I'm going to make the claim, even if I don't use that phrase, that right now what you're doing is a volume based approach to content, to speaking, to selling, whatever. And so don't market more, matter more. I have to use that phrase or other ideas like it to meet people where they're at because you're marketing a ton and you'd like it to matter more. Wouldn't it be great? Because if you matter more, you can hustle less and all these riffs on it. That's the we want. And then I move down to, and so we need, and I have a philosophical change, my premise. Think of it like this. If you want to matter more, as we just agreed you do, then necessarily, logically, you need to think resonance over reach. Some people think what you need is X. I think what you need is Y. That's the Y in my equation. That's the premise informing everything I do, and I can unpack that for you. And oh, by the way, our hope, this grand outcome, the best case outcome of embracing this premise is all of your work lands you in a really great place. You're trying to be the biggest, you're trying to be the best, the noisiest. No, don't be the best, be their favorite. So 3 distinct phrases worked, in my case, over months of time to find, but giving you a logical 3-rung ladder to construct your message. We want, we need, we hope. If you're selling a product, right in the we need section is where you start to introduce the specifics of what you're selling, where you use either a, bunch of website copy, testimonials, like a visual framework to map it, all these things that we do anyway, just structured and planted in the right order and maybe punched up a little bit because you have to convey those 3 ideas in the right order as with on a page or a pitch.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking through that. We want, like with the story cycle, Janie, a line we've used a lot, and we are just fleshing through the story too. It keeps changing every week as I dial it in. So it's really, we're turning the overwhelming prospect of brand development into an overjoyed experience.
Okay. Is that what they want? Or are they trying to say, you want to evolve from a generic expert to a storyteller? Like, what's the obvious, easy first moment of agreement? A good example is my daughter the other day asked me why we have aquariums. And I was like, I don't know how to answer this. So I said, okay, so you know how we want to protect animals and the ocean? She's like, yeah. So it's not like a groundbreaking idea. It's just they can already agree this is what you want. And she already understands it, so I don't have to belabor it. And I might reframe it slightly for her, or in my case, marketing. Don't market more, matter more. That's a slight reframe. But, given a quick second of introspection, anybody who is marketing wishes they mattered more. They could be in the business of creating infinite content, and they're like, we still want this content to matter more. So that's an easy first moment of agreement.
Yeah,
so
in this case, it would be you want a clear, concise, and compelling brand story.
There you go. Now, what do you think, or what do you assert? Because remember, a premise is a defensible assertion. What do you assert about getting that others might debate you on?
That you can now, with AI, do it very quickly. Following proven IP, so now you can turn that overwhelming brand development prospect that usually takes months, literally into minutes.
Okay. So if I were to come along and say, I am an AI super fan or expert in the marketing space, I completely get this technology, or even a casual observer, like I've kicked the tires on AI, are they likely to disagree with that assessment of yours?
Their biggest disagreement would be it's just going to be more AI slop.
Okay.
So
that's what we got to circle around that.
Mm-hmm.
We got to figure out, what is it about doing it with AI that you see and others see? Because to me, that's just like the macro promise of AI is like efficiency in many cases, or seeing what you can't because there's too much data or too much text, like extraction. I think what we're trying to get to is, what is something that the typical, AI, either interested person or expert level person would go, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, what I like to say, EI, emotional intelligence plus AI equals ROI, which is your return on intelligence. Now, take that a little bit deeper, and this isn't just general AI doing its thing. This is
Yeah.
AI powering our intellectual property, the story cycle system that I've used for over 20 years, building brands by as much as 600%. And I've taken that analog proven process, and we've built this AI now that is
Yeah. Yeah.
infused with it. And so this is just not your gen AI bot running around out there. This is,
Okay.
this is a tool that knows our
Yeah.
system, but then knows your brand. The more you iterate with it, it gets
Right.
smarter and smarter and smarter.
So if I scroll below the fold on Story Cycle Genie's page, the immediate value delivered, the top is kind of the macro level stuff and what the product does, testimonials, and then the right below the fold, test the strength of your current brand story for free. And so I'm wondering about the word strength. I'm wondering if there's an assertion you can make where you play off the conventional wisdom that like having a brand story is the goal. Nope, it's having a strong brand story. Or not that these are it, right? I'm just
Right,
sort of
right,
like
right.
trying to chip away at it. Or an alternative might be you think that the whole point of a brand story is you have a clear message, right? Like the story itself represents the message you're telling. And it's all about clarity. And what you're saying is actually, thanks to story structure, consultants, content giving advice, and even AI with all the things you can load it up with, clarity is now table stakes. What you need is a stronger story. Here's what we mean by strong. Here's the strength element. And you can now use our tool, which is optimized, to give you the table stakes stuff, clarity, but more to the point, how strong it is. Because I'm seeing this copy. Curious how strong your brand narrative is? Run it through our brand story grader. Now, maybe that's a feature and not the whole product, but that's an idea that, might not apply apples to apples, but just to like show you the flavor of it. I'm looking for how does Park see this space in a way that makes me go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. And it's not just like a line, there's clearly a lot already here that I can find and pull out and just kind of massage or punch up. Because you're already saying it, and we're just trying to articulate it, which is always the hard part.
Mm-hmm. And you get so close to it, it's hard to do it on your own, right? And
Yes,
that's
right,
one of the
right.
beauties of the Genie is it's like that outside consultant looking in, and it validates what you do well, it reveals the gaps, and it even,
Yeah,
inspires you with new ways of thinking about it. But it's
right,
so hard to do it on your own.
right. So I'm looking for that. I'm like, you want a clear brand story. But before, like for me, it's like, if I took that and ran with it, given something I said on the mic today, I would say you want a clear brand story, or you know the success of your business depends on the clarity of your story. Right? Nice little musical line there. The clarity of your story is what you're anchoring to now. That's now the conventional wisdom I go and attack. And so I have to think to myself, why do I dislike the fact that people think clarity is somehow good? Now, by the way, stepping out of this exercise, I do believe that clarity matters. Like I'm not trying to attack it. Like I'm not trying to be like, oh, that's not
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
No, I'm on the side of clarity. But like, okay, everyone out there, everyone I hear from, all my buyers, all my coffee meetings, everyone's always using the word clarity for like what I provide when I sell services. Now I'm going to go build this AI product. And there's something that's always sat poorly with me around clarity, around that idea that they're obsessed with clarity. What is it? And you might go, aha, I know. It's the fact that that is not open to interpretation. You understand it. But as Ishiguro said, stories are like one person saying to another, this is how it feels to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, clarity. Does it also feel this way to you? Alignment, resonance, emotion. That's the part people miss in their obsession with clarity. Is they get these very clear but sterile stories out there. Who cares about that? Like everybody could be clear, but like it also just helps me know like you're clearly beige. Who cares? So to me, I'm like, I'm going to go chipping away and I might have it in my head, or I might go, I don't know if that's it. I don't know if the Ishiguro thing applies, or I couldn't even come up with that. I got to go right my way to clarity. We're saying clarity a lot here, but
Right.
I got to go find what I'm trying to say, not by like navel gazing, but by creating content, talking to buyers, getting out in the market and taking stabs at it. A while ago, I made this claim that Story 1.0 was this body of knowledge based on story structure and process, and it got us here. Why am I so annoyed with it now? Oh, because like AI can do that and your competitors can do that. And I've encountered many people that are well versed in story structure that I didn't know existed, but they are expert in it. And I'm a better storyteller. Why? Oh, I practice more. I have the posture and the grand delusion that I am a storyteller. I want to be the Anthony Bourdain, a bit, whatever. Okay, so there's process. That's story 1.0. Then there's practice and posture. There's 3 P's to the craft, not just one. Story 1.0 over-indexed on the first P. Story 2.0 will necessarily bring to light this idea that you have to have a practice and you have to bring the posture, the way you see yourself in the world and pulling from your daily life and showing up with the reps repeatedly, not just a pristine deck. So for a while, I was just like, yeah, there's like all this storytelling knowledge out there. I dislike it or it's insufficient. And then I was like, okay, now there's a story 2.0 body of knowledge. I don't know what that is. And I'll write my way to clarity. And then 7 or 8 essays in, I come up with the 3 Ps, right? Now, is that a thing or not? I don't know. I have to go validate it. But this is the work of a public voice where you're like, all along the way, I picked up fans and clients by writing about that because they liked how I thought when they invested more time. But to make it shorter, pithier, repeatable, I need to continue to validate it, continue to refine it, find the turn of phrase, all of that. And so I think I'd send you off as we end our time. Like I'd send you off on that journey, Park, of like continuing to dig and refine it so that you can then design the IP around it.
Yeah, and the idea there is that the common wisdom, conventional wisdom is, yes, everyone wants a clear brand story, but if your story clearly sucks, then that's no good. So
clarity doesn't mean strength. Clarity doesn't mean efficacy. Clarity is just, I get it. I understand. Is that enough to spark an action? Probably not.
Strength through alignment. Strength, does it resonate, per your premise? And then therefore, here's how you get there.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, this has been fascinating, Jay. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and what you're doing? And by the way, sign up for your newsletter. It's really great.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes. I'm refactoring my podcast, How Stories Happen. It'll continue to have the guests that people grow accustomed to where we workshop their actual ideas, but emphasis on the workshopping part. So, as many fancy people as I can get to be vulnerable and actually take us into a draft. That's the plan. And then clients and friends and peers who will bring an idea from the notebook. Ann Hanley's come on a couple times with a draft of her newsletter, pre-publish, and we've workshopped that idea. Or workshopping an opener of a speech, or I want to put the process on display, not because I want you to copy the process, because by doing that, to my point earlier, the listener goes, oh, I see how they're like workshopping it back and they're practicing here. It's about the practice. And now I need to practice. Oh, they have this posture of seeing it like a comedian sees their work or an actor or not a marketer, right? And so that show is called How Stories Happen. And we're going to go inside even more than we have in the first 2 years. What does it take to actually develop a message, a speech, a story to resonate?
Oh, that's great. And when are you going to kick that off? 2026?
2026. We're taking a break. So we just wrapped up with the great Scott Stratton, who shared one of his signature stories from his keynotes, big marketing speaker, Hall of Fame speaker. That was this week, end of December. Probably mid Q1, early Q2, the show will be back with full force episodes and this renewed focus.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jay, thank you very much, and I hope you have a fantastic holiday season coming up.
You too. Thanks, Park.
Have a good one.
You too.
So have you got the start to your premise worked out? I mean, this is such a great show. I learned so much, and I hope you'll share it with anyone you know who would benefit by developing their own premise. And if you want to apply that premise to your brand story, then head on over to StoryCycleGenie.ai, the only AI-driven narrative-native platform that will enable you to develop your powerful brand narrative strategy in minutes, not months. Check it out. StoryCycleGenie.ai. And I hope you'll join me next Monday when John Booker, renowned mythologist, storyteller, and the executive director of the Joseph Campbell Foundation, joins us to explore how the hero's journey shows up in all of our lives every single day and how you can use it to build your brand's narrative strategy. That's next Monday. I hope you join us. And until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.